this is fun. Bye, Father. Okay, and I just have to start with Jesuit joke because actually, Father Jacob, a very good friend from way back, is a Jesuit, and he's out of friendship's sake staying, you see. So in any case, so there was this mother who was very concerned about her son because her son had mentioned that he might have a priestly vocation. So she goes to a priest and she says, I think my son is really thinking about a priestly vocation. How can I help him? What do I do? Where should I send him? So the priest is thinking about this and he said, well, if he has a diocesan priestly vocation, then he would go to the bishop and he would go to the diocese or the seminary that the bishop would send him to. Now, that's like 8 years of study. She's like, okay. And he said, but then again, maybe he has a Dominican priestly vocation, but that's like 10 years of study. And she's like, oh, okay. And he said, or maybe he's meant to be a Jesuit, but that's like 12 years of study. And the mother sat there looking at him very seriously and then said, signing up for that last one, he's always been a slow learner. Young people today, the Millennial generation. Many of you have mentioned to me how you really want to hear this talk, these thoughts, and I don't blame you at all because the Millennial generation can be very confusing. I just want to put in a brief little, look at all these wonderful materials that you can take home with you. It's on a table that I'm not standing by because I'm talking to y'all. But look at that gorgeous thing that you could put up in your parishes, and then there's all kinds of materials, and there's a thing about the retreats that I'm telling you all about for your children and your children's children, and on and on and on, vocation discernment, and the newsletters and all this stuff. See what all I brought for y'all? I don't want to take it back home. And yes, I am from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Okay, I'm going to read to you a letter that I got shortly after the beginning of our community, probably maybe 3 years after. And it was actually a woman, and Susan will be interested in this, who was a junior or senior at Franciscan University at that time. But anyway, this letter came to me as the vocation director. Dear Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, wait. Before reading this, pray. Okay, now you can begin. Oh, Lord help us. I'm not sure why I'm writing. This is literally what she wrote. Besides the fact that I have this nagging feeling inside of me that will not leave. I'm a junior studying theology and recently took a year from college to serve with NET, National Evangelization Team Ministries. I have a great love for youth, and I really feel God is leading me in that direction. I've always been against, she's got underlined, the possibility that the Lord may be calling me to religious life. And I have been adamant about that. So why am I writing you? The other day I went to confession and spent some time with Jesus in the chapel before heading home. And as I was walking out of the chapel, I did something I've never done before. I walked over to the section holding brochures for religious orders, and I didn't even really look at them except your name caught my attention, Mother of the Eucharist. So hesitatingly, I grabbed it and stuck it in my backpack for later. The only logic I can see is that I have a great devotion to the Eucharist, and I'm struggling to get my relationship with Mary back on track. So maybe I was just intrigued by the name of your community. It was Mary who brought me back to the faith and led me to Christ. Unfortunately, I seem to have put her on a back burner for the past number of years. But she's been continuously pursuing me. The only other possibility that God has me writing to you is to find out more information on your order. Underline, that scares me. This is so strange. But I have this huge urge inside of me to mention that I would like to meet you all. Although I'm not really sure I want to. But I feel like I should write it anyway. This is probably the craziest letter you've ever received. And I really feel very sheepish about it. So if you think I'm crazy, just don't respond. With that being said, I'm really not expecting to hear from you. If you are even reading this, I must have had a moment of great courage, because this is just not like me. Thank you for taking the time to read this, if you are. It's good to see your sisters, great signs of being wedded to God the Father. God bless you all. Spin forward, I wrote back, I think you have a religious vocation. You are so typical of young women today. She writes back, there's not much about me that's typical. So I go to Franciscan, and we had a sister study in there, and that's kind of how she got to know us at all. And she goes, there she is, down there in the tent. Well, I saw her talking to all these guys and smoking and all this, and I said, oh, this is going to be fun. So I go up, and so the sister said, this is Sister Joseph Andrew. Remember, she's the vocationer. She goes, oh, hi, sister. It's good to see you. Have you been here very long? And I was measuring in my mind how long it would take for that to burn. So I kept talking to her, and she kept talking and getting a little bit nervous and kind of edging around. I said, oh, calm down, honey. And she said, oh, well, I mean, I am. I could tell, you know. And pretty soon it flicks out, and I'm going, okay, now let's talk honestly. And she goes, did you already know? And I said, of course. I mean, as if I couldn't smell. Anyway, today she is one of our superiors. Yeah, these millennials. I'm going to just recap a little bit to kind of set the stage of what I said yesterday, because all this, there's a lot to it. Priesthood, consecrated religious life, and yes, marriage also, definitely, in the third millennial, will survive and grow to the degree that we are on fire. We can't just act like, oh, everybody does anything. We have to say, I'm a unique person, and I love God, and I love the graces that He's given me, and this sets me free, and this excites me. So, as Benedict XVI said, we have to ignite the light in every heart we find. The distinctive and culturally separating aspects of religious life are what makes it glow. Just as marriage, the distinctive elements are what makes you glow. Priesthood, whatever is the vocation, they're not the same. They complement. That's a whole nother thing that we can talk about forever. But we are vowed counterculturalists, and I love that. Well, a question I get a lot, because I travel a lot. Do people stare at you? I'm like, yeah, they do. Yeah. Does that make you uncomfortable? Are you kidding me? I love it. I mean, if they have any sense, they're going to probably say, I don't think I've seen anybody quite like you. You know, it's sad to say. So, yeah. Well, do they ever make any derogatory remarks? Not if they have any sense. Can't really say they do. One thing, our world is in such perpetual change. And there's a positive to this, and there's a negative to this. The positive is there's a lot of opportunity. And we can, as Father has said, it's one of my favorite things, be creative. Use our imaginations. The sky's the limit. It's not really, because heaven still is beyond that. We can't be creative enough with God. We can't, if we really pray and we get a good idea, go do it. If it doesn't work, you didn't lose anything. And if it does, that's how the church grows through the ages. The saints get these ideas and they make them happen. And everybody in here is a pre-saint. We're called to meet together. I was thinking, in a few hours I will be leaving, and I think I would want to say to all of you all, see you in heaven. Won't that be great? This was fun. Won't that be incredible? And so I think we need to seize the moment God chose to have us be born. with the goods, with the challenges, and yet to know everybody was made for heaven. That's the point of our lives, to reflect God, to be made in His image and likeness, and to get home to be in heaven with Him. Okay, so 21 years of my community, I had the vocation director, a job I absolutely love. I go sometimes to these meetings and they'll say, burnout occurs with vocation directors about after 3 or 4 years. I'm like, you're kidding me. Why didn't somebody tell me this earlier? I'm not going to be burned out. They enable me to really notice, though, this is something when young people or society is beginning to turn another corner. I've seen several of these corners be turned. The young women that sit in front of me and the young men that come and talk about vocational discernment, I'm seeing differences as time goes on and different corners that are being turned, so to speak. So, though I would love for this talk to go on for about 5 hours, it can't. But I want to talk about the millennial generation. Basically, these are the people born between like 1984-ish and 2000-ish. Okay, so that kind of gives you the millennial generation. It's the largest in U.S. history, about 80 million people. An important thing to remember is they're all digital natives. Beyond that, people had to learn how to use these digital devices. This group grew up with them, just like they grew up with other things that we grew up with, but this is their world. They don't know a world without these instruments, this technology. And so they came of age during a time of a lot of turmoil because of the technological changes, the globalization, the economic disruption. If you consider those ages, they've been formed by this technological culture, and it's daily expanding what we would call the limits, but way beyond now, of science, of communication, of instant knowledge for anything you want. Everybody can be a doctor today because you can look it up on Google. Try that out with your doctor. Well, on Google, I read an article that said, don't read those things. But we do, because God gave us a gift called curiosity. But curiosity, again, as all gifts, is going to be good if we use it correctly, and that takes a lot of self-discipline. And as we continue, self-discipline is at a low right now for some very interesting reasons. Millennials are slower to marry, about average age maybe 30. Many of you were married somewhere in your 20s, some right out of high school, and it kind of all depends, but this is a very strong millennial trait. Father mentioned, is there something better coming down the pike, so I don't want to tie any knots and make any vocational decisions too early. And I know I'm talking about some of your children and your children's children. They're slower to move out on their own. They kind of like the security of home. And that fact, of course, influences vocational decisions, as we've mentioned. Millennials have adopted different attitudes to ownership, and they've kind of spawned a new economy called a sharing economy. Very few really want their own homes or cars. And you probably lived for the moment you could buy your own homes when you were married, and you could own a car, and that's not too far in the distant past, but the millennials are not interested in that. They're more sharing. Now, in regards to religious life, priesthood perhaps, at least religious life, the community life they like. They're very attracted to that. They come and visit and they make the retreat, and they love the camaraderie of the sisters, teasing one another, having fun together. The community life, the common life. This really appeals to them. Other things, such as poverty and obedience, don't appeal to them. Because it's interesting, that 1 in 9 millennials holds a credit card co-signed by a parent. Now, you might say, okay, well, the other 8 don't. Yeah, but that one is setting a trend, don't you see? When they come home and say, Mom, he's got this co-signed card. And interesting things, too, no previous generation has ever been so dedicated to wellness. Have you ever seen so many wellness stores, et cetera, et cetera? 83% of millennials have sworn off smoking. They're not interested in it. They lavishly devote time and money to exercising and to eating correctly. Yet, as I say, I've also never seen so many youths who bear such generous, missionary hearts, eager to help others any place on the face of the globe. These statistics, you might say, where are you getting them? I'm getting them from a lot of places. One of them is Goldman Sachs, which keeps publishing these things and studying this because, of course, of their investment management from New York and their global investing. So they're very interested in where's the next generation heading? How can we serve them? Now, he's hysterical, Simon Sinek. He's a British American author, and he's a motivational speaker, and he has these characterizations of millennials, and he characterizes them by their missing 4 primary or essential pieces, is the way he says it. The first one, believe it or not, is parenting. And I can assure you this is true. When a young woman sits down in front of me, my first thing is, tell me about your parents. It's my first question. Millennials grew up subject to overachieving parents who told them all the time how special they are. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, thank you. Who tended to give them everything that they wanted. It's this friendship versus parent struggle. Who complained to their teachers, ask our sisters who teach, until the teachers, not our sisters, but others, just relented and put this child in some unachievable honors class because Mom said, this child's brilliant. You just don't understand. Yeah. Who gave them medals for participation. And even, I remember the first time I saw this, I sat in the back of this thing and I just wanted to raise my hand and go, you're kidding. And since I couldn't, I almost stood up and yelled it out. Like, can we have a brain that functions around here? Gave a medal to the child who came in last, lest that child not feel honored. And you know, the truth is, the child knows how unjust that is. Walking out, I started talking. I said, what do you think about your medal? This is stupid, was the response. But the parent felt good. Now, they're growing up and they're thrust into a real world. And they realize they're not quite as special as they constantly heard. And they can't have everything that they want instantly. And so they say, we're a generation that has been lied to. That's a moral premise, truth. Interesting way for them to now turn the tables now that they're getting older and they're struggling. Okay, a second thing, we mentioned it before, technology. Millennials tend to present a tough exterior. Why? Because that's a sure sign that they have a lower self-esteem. Social media releases these dopamines, which basically are feel-good hormones. With each email, each Instagram, somebody thought of me, somebody loves me, I'm important. It's like your little gold star for getting out of bed in the morning. I got another one and another one. Oh, I'm so... Because the person interiorly has a very low self-concept and needs constantly somebody's affirmation. And we're setting them up to be this. It's this same hormone that's highly addictive. And we're we're seeing the results. Smoking, drinking, gambling, whatever. But whereas the smoking, drinking, gambling at least has some age restraints, the technology doesn't have any. So they become addicted to seeing their self-worth by the number of attempts made to reach them. Some people discover alcohol to help them cope, which then hardwires them. And to cure their social, cultural, financial stresses, their inner longing and their inner loneliness, their inner emptiness so many times, they take pills perhaps, and so we see a rise in suicide, etc. And people scratch their heads and go, this child had everything. These parents loved this child. This child was good in so many things. Look at his wall. He's got trophies galore. And even in grade school, he had stars for... The child knew as he was growing up, this isn't real. Who really loves me just because I exist? Because God made me. Is that never good enough for somebody? That he trusts as he looks at an adult world. Another thing, and I've seen this in so many of my travels, and I can think of some colleges and universities in particular, where you go into the lunchroom, and yeah, they're sitting together at big tables, and they're all into their own texting, etc., and they're not speaking. You know, actually talking to people is essential. Looking them in the eye, as Father said. Being present to the human dimension. You know, the miracles of Christ, he touched people. He was with people. He heard people. He used his senses to communicate with humanity. We haven't changed. God hasn't changed our nature. Third, impatience. Now that is an impatient one. I certainly am, and maybe a few of you all are. But we do get into the same culture. How many are on Amazon.com? And so you order it, and tomorrow it's at your door. Always fits my timeline nicely. Yeah, almost anything you want, you can have instantly, except job assurance, a deep prayer life, strength of relationships, the whole process of self-knowledge. Who am I as God made me to be? Those don't come easy. Millennials want to reach the top of the mountain. We live right outside of U of M Hospital, and U of M takes over Ann Arbor. And so many people will say, it is impossible to find a good worker today. They think that they should start at the top of the line. And they're having real difficulties with this. Well, you got to start down below and you can work your way. I don't want that approach. Look at all my stars. You're talking to me. Maybe you're thinking of somebody else, but I can show you all my stars. I need to be way up there. And a new phenomenon coming sometimes. How many just skip school because they're just tired? They need a day off. They need to chill out. Maybe they're depressed. Fourth, environment. Take this amazing group of young, fantastic people, and they would say we were dealt a bad hand. The millennials dangerously think the problem is inside themselves. But I would say the problem is lack of good leadership. By the time I finish, I'll give you some pointers. We have to work extra hard to teach them social skills. I know rectors in a lot of seminaries, and the question that they're constantly saying, Sister, how do you give the human social skills to your young women? I'm like, well, women come with a lot more than men do to begin with. But beyond that, you have to teach it. They don't come in. And yet if you didn't see a priest that had decent social skills, you'd say, oh my gosh, somebody needs to have grabbed him and taught him a few things ahead of time. Or a sister, or anyone, an adult. We're kind of like, gosh, how haven't you grown up in humanity? Where did you not? But they take time to teach this. Somebody has to do it. And we have to do the hard work on that. So here's a few ideas. In meetings or when you're talking to someone, set a few rules. If they buck them, they admire you for having rules because that's a new phenomenon in their life. You have rules and I have to obey them? Well, I don't like this, but in reality it's like, go for it. I can do it. I'll show you. Okay, we're going to have a meeting and no cell phones are allowed. Unless it's a meeting that perhaps you need a cell phone for pictures or something like that. But basically, no cell phones. Do you know they really get into that pretty easily? It's like, oh, that makes sense. You want my attention? Okay, I understand. We want to form them into human beings who love God and are open to one another in relationships. You know, sometimes the digital world has been called the sixth continent, and it has given young people a set of behaviors and thought processes very different from their parents. As we mentioned, millennials are slower to make life decisions. And they've adopted different attitudes, as we've mentioned, to ownership. And it's just an interesting phenomenon to see where is this going. But when you challenge the millennials, and this is why my community is growing, I am not afraid of challenging them. And they look at me, and the first thing is shock, like nobody has ever pierced me that deeply to say, this is what I'm seeing. And then they go, keep talking, sister, you're telling me the truth. I had a girl at the last retreat sit down. These are the things that I want if I enter a religious community. And I'm like, good luck, kid. Next person, excuse me. I have a very good intelligence, and I'm saying you're not using it wisely right now, because I know a lot more about what you're talking about than you do. And you don't have enough sense to listen, so just get the next girl to come in. And she goes, nobody's ever said that before. And I said, well, I'm saying it, so if you can't take it, honey, I am so sorry. Grow up and get the next girl. She sat there and she goes, may I ask you a question? I said, this is the first time you've asked me a question. You've been telling me everything. She said, can I just stay a little bit longer? And I said, yeah, if you have something that makes sense. Well, you do. Will you keep talking to me? All she wanted was truth, the challenge. And I mean, I challenged her high, and I said, I expect to hear back from you, and you're to give me your own truthful report card of how you're improving in the following areas. You don't know everything. You ask questions and you listen. You pray for humility. You do some really good penetrating reading, because, honey, you are way too stuck on yourself, and life is not going to be good if you don't change some of these things. My parents never said that to me, sister. Why is it making sense? I said, because it's true. She's doing her homework. Whether or not, whatever her vocation is, I do not know, but that's a soul that hopefully will be saved. And they're not rare in some kind of strange phenomenon. And when you begin to pierce it, they open up and want the truth and want the challenge. So, set the priorities. You know, before we get too hard on the present generation, as I already mentioned, I'm going to mention a bit about the preceding generation that formed the millennials. Okay? These are Gen Xers, born approximately, again, between 1966 and 1984. Psychologists refer to this Gen X generation as the lost generation. Why? Because they teethed on the template of society's latchkey kids, exposed to lots of daycare and lots of divorce. Is it any wonder that Gen Xers are known to have the lowest voting participation rate of any generation? Newsweek labeled them, quote, the generation that dropped out without ever turning on the news or looking into any social issues. Not surprisingly, parental support for religious vocations today is seriously lacking because Gen Xers bear scars of deep skepticism. Arguably the best educated generation, and Gen Xers value their children's education, even if the sons or daughters must graduate with serious debts that would put any vocational discernment on hold. Something that, in particular for women, which we haven't talked as much about, we've been talking more about how a man comes to know his vocation. Women are very different. And that could really put that vocation discernment on hold, which really could mess with her discernment, much more so than if a guy puts his on hold. We're very different in timing. Ever notice that each generation finds its own life-defining moments? So if you were to ask someone of the greatest generation, where were you on D-Day? That would be the question they'd be able to answer, and that's life-defining. They don't forget. If you asked a baby boomer, what question? Where were you when Kennedy was shot? Or Martin Luther King? They will remember. If you ask a Gen Xer, what's the defining moment in their life? They would say the question would be, where were you when you were told your parents were getting a divorce? The answers bear long-term repercussions on their own marriages and their parenting rights. So kind of in short, millennials were raised in large measure walking on eggshells in efforts to lower the animosity they felt between their own parents' relationship. This eggshell approach to life cracks through two very important fibers of everyone's society. Number one, deep personal faith. And with that, I would say deep knowledge of who you are and who you aren't, self-knowledge. And two, commitment. Very hard to make commitments. But there's hope. As I mentioned yesterday, and certainly my community is not the only one, but priesthood and religious life and good marriages are on the rise. Now, we don't necessarily look at numbers, but we look at certain places where numbers do prove this. And so I wanted to mention, back in 1983, Pope St. John Paul the Great gave religious what he called the defining essential elements on religious life. And I just want to kind of go through these somewhat quickly. But you'll see how common sense they really are. Okay, first of all, he says religious life is a vocation given by God and recognized by the church through public vows. That's just straightforward as it can be. Vows are specific, and they can't be unambiguous. They have to say what the vow means in the vow formula. Then the person knows what he or she is vowing to God. Two, a stable form of community life approved by the church. I think this is extremely important. Communities that have authentic, happy, joyful, close community life are going to be looking elsewhere for friendships. They will have friendships elsewhere, but their family is at home, just as married people's families are at home. Those are the people that love you and know you, and that you can have the most fun with, and you can be yourself totally with. And yeah, we rub each other, and that makes for greater holiness. And that's essential. They are joyful communities if they're going to be attracting vocations. Third, fidelity to a very specific founding gift and sound traditions. When a young woman comes, she has every right to say, "Who are you?" And the answer should be, "Well, we are," and there it goes. And then perhaps you would ask a question, you say, "That's not who we are." We know who we are and who we aren't. It's very appealing to a very ambiguous world where they're like, nobody seems to know anything that's really solid. Wow, this is very strong. This is very truthful. Here's who we are and here's who we aren't. 4, sharing in the church's or Christ's mission of a corporate apostolate. You know, we're teachers as Dominicans. We come home and whether we were in the classroom or we were giving talks somewhere or we were doing a retreat or we were writing articles for publication, it's all teaching. It's getting the truth out. It's influencing people to say, "I want God," and this is beginning to fill some of that deep desire. It's teaching the truth. 5, personal and liturgical prayer, especially Eucharistic adoration. I can't say it enough, but there's one thing that I would like to live with you. 2 things, the Eucharist and Mary. They can do what we can't do. Our community, when we were founded, we said every day, the first hour, we get up, the bell rings at 5:30 to 6:30, we're in Eucharistic adoration every single day. How can I love Christ, my spouse, if I don't even get to talk to him? And that's my face-to-face time. He's outside the tabernacle. I look at him and he looks at me. And if I fall asleep, I always tell this to the girls that make the retreat, and they're like, "Oh gosh, I'm on from 2 to 4. How am I going to stay awake?" I go, "Come get the really strong coffee," which we have over here. And then the other thing is, if you fall asleep, remember what St. Teresa said. She was the child Jesus. She actually said, "God must love to watch me sleep because I do it every morning and he never wakes me up." You know, just God is God. He loves us. You know, to love our strengths and our weaknesses and to say it's all part of who I am by God's design. And to be comfortable with those. And to see those in others and to teach them to be comfortable with those. So personal prayer, spending time straight with Christ himself. Liturgical prayer, daily holy Mass. How can we do it? If my spouse is Christ and I don't see him and connect with him daily, I'm not going to do very well. Marriages teach us the two shall become one. That's exactly what happens in the Eucharist. The two become one. And that's essential. 7, public witness. This goes along with the Church's Canon Law 669, and it's reflected in this document on paragraph 34, quote, "Religious should wear the religious garb of the Institute, describing in their proper law as a sign of consecration and witness of poverty." I love when my planes are late. Gives me the opportunity to run around that airport. They don't know who I am, and I don't care. I'm not after who I am, but check it out. They immediately think of God. They come running with their intentions. Atlanta is one of my favorites because so many military men go through there, and they're not afraid to come running up. I'm on my way to Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. So to pray for my family. Pray for my buddy who no longer lives because he gave his life to the country. Pray for. And we're professional prayers. That's what we do. Why wouldn't you ask for prayer? And I love that. The church is healthy when the laity know who they are and who they aren't, and they do who they are well. The same, the spiritual motherhood of the sisters, the same as the spiritual fatherhood of the priest. God loves that when he looks down. Remember, the plan is his. We didn't create our vocations. We didn't create ourselves. We didn't put ourselves into the family that would form us so much. We didn't put in our foibles. We didn't put in it's ours. As this is the perfect combo for you to become a saint. The saint I have willed for all eternity. Use this combo well. Become the saint I need you to be. Lifelong formation. This goes for all of us. We're very much aware. An novitiate is only the beginning, the first taste. Every single day there's lifelong formation. Becoming more and more the saints God called us to be. A form of government, that's essential. Very essential. As one of the founders says, you won't believe the red tape that Rome gives. Rightly so. And right when you think, okay, we've got it, Rome says, oh, you forgot. Oh, okay, well now we've got it. We can condense to this. Oh, wait a minute, you also do. And Rome has every right to do that. Authenticity is essential. Very important. And this specific relationship to the church. Okay, some common problems that I'm seeing in this new corner turning. One, acedia. Young people are made for adventure, for challenges and the thrill that comes in giving one's all in a daring feat. These transform them into selfish, worried about myself, people to greatness. And we have to provide those opportunities. And if we don't, they'll go looking for it themselves. It always mystified, well, it didn't for too long. But when you hear some young person with a great possible future has gone into ISIS or some other strange phenomenon, they're looking for somebody to tell them, we need you. And this is what we need you to do. To clarify and say, we need you. How sad is it if the church isn't saying, we need you. We have to do this. And so one of the things that they hate the most is boredom. They would rather have a meaningless existence than be bored. Isn't that an interesting thing? They want adventure. They want greatness. We could take these into so many other things. But it was St. Thomas Aquinas, the great Dominican theologian, who wrote about perseverance. So I was talking to a couple who said, yeah, that's the way we've been able to stay together for 52 years. And I said, thank you. I think the greatest virtue is fidelity. Fidelity to the commitment. And that flies in the face of young people today who want that but are afraid of it because they see so much lack of commitment. We must be faithful. And he says action should continue throughout life because we're all a work in progress. Can I ask you all in the back of those things how much time I've got? I'm like halfway through, and how much time does this say I'm supposed to be done? Lunch? Nobody said we had 11:15. 11:15? You're so...
You have 10 minutes and then questions for 15 minutes.
Only 10 more minutes?
So you can take it anytime.
You're sweet. Hey, I'll try to go faster, but I just feel like I'm barely touching the tip of the iceberg. But I will calmly continue. Jesus, why did you create time? Okay. Youth were made for challenges. Remember that. Don't be afraid to challenge. Again, this is how our community is growing. I am not afraid to sit at them and go, I'm not falling for that one bit. Now start telling the truth. And they immediately melt and they go, well, this is the situation. Because they come up, the world will believe their stories. I don't. Because I know they're good. And I know there's reasons behind, and many times they need to get professional help. I'm not, in any way, I send so many to get professional help because I don't want them to limp through life, and they will if they don't get these wounds cured. I've seen it. And I can't honestly, and that's a relatively calm thing for me to say, considering some of the situations they've come from. And I don't think there's ever been anybody that has said, I'm not going to do that. And whatever is their vocation, if it's marriage, I'm like, you are not about ready to give your life to another one who also has original sin. When yours is so glaring inside you, get it together. And it rings true. Thank you. This is what I need to do, isn't it? Yes, it is. God loves you. And you've got so many walls and thicknesses and reasons why you can't be good and you can't be trusted and nobody should see any future in you, etc., etc. It's not true. St. Francis Xavier supposedly said, whether or not he actually did, I like this. Give me the child until he's 7, he just said. 7. And I'll give you back the man. It starts immediately. And if we don't meet the child until he's 17, because how many times don't, he's still far more pliable than his exterior appearances would make him look. I know inside him, her. There's still a child's heart that desires authentic goodness, desires God. Families have got to get on board. You know, so many times I meet a young person and I will say today, and they'll tell me all about their family, and it's not necessarily a good story, and yet this person is so on fire with love of God. I'm like, where did you come from? And they'll look at me and they'll say, oh, if you only knew my grandmother. Oh, if you only knew my grandfather. Pope Francis talks quite a bit about grandparents. I think he kind of sees himself in that bracket to a certain extent. And he really does, and I always like it when he does. You know, because we need to hand on the faith. And sometimes it's not necessarily coming from the parents, but where are the grandparents? That's an important thing that's coming up in today's world. Okay, the first letter that I read to you was maybe 19 years ago now. So I'm going to read one to you for the past 2 years. Dear Sister Joseph Andrew's email. I spoke with my dad a week after the retreat. He scolded me for an hour, pointing out what I'm giving up, but nothing that I'll be gaining. He made hurtful arguments, and he cycled through them about 4 times before I finally said, I've got to go to bed. I spoke to Father Joe, my spiritual director, and he advised me not to make any decision based on my dad's opinion alone. God has consoled me through Father's advice and through your prayer, sister. That being said, I really want to be a sister. When I bring it to prayer, being 100% of His is where I absolutely feel the most joy. When I think about single or married life, I can see myself being very happy in that too. But I think for me, the way God made my heart, there would always be something missing. But I'm still praying the rosary, and I stop by adoration at least once a week. I'm scheduled every Saturday to go to adoration. And I go to daily Mass when I can, and I talk to God a lot through the day because I know He understands. I'm making my Marian consecration on March 25th, and I'm incredibly excited about this. And I've registered for the next discernment retreat. Sister, must I wait another year with my father and his situation? I don't want to run away from God, and I don't want to think my time for convenience is also His. To get those layers of that beautiful heart. She's willing to do God's will. And she knows that there will be suffering. A typical case like this, I would say, do you know your grandparents? Are they where you can get to them? Could you perhaps find some support in either of your grandparents? And most of the time the answer will be, yeah, good idea. My mom's mom would get it. Or sometimes my father's mom might. Because you never know where the anger comes from in the parental generation. Life has dealt them some suffering and they've not used it to become better, but to become bitter. And they're passing this on. But the young people don't want that. I'm going to say, kind of in a quickie, some differences in men and women. I'm just going to touch on this, and I could go on this forever. But men and women come at vocational discernment at different times. Women are much faster. They grow up being relational, looking at the world and trying to find their place in it. Young guys grow up taking trucks and things apart and trying to put them back together. They're very much active in what they do. And when it comes time to vocational discernment, they're still thinking, I've got time. But for a woman, when she's really beginning to discern, which tends to be younger, she's not thinking she has time. She's thinking that relationship is everything to me. Is it to find a man and marry him and have our children? Or is it by God's design to marry him and all his kids are mine? Which one is it? And yes, there can also be consecrated virginity and I'm seeing that on the rise too, but I don't have time to talk about it all. So I'll give the kind of two bigger ones. But when she begins to go in that direction, she needs support. And this is when I wish I could talk to all the priests. She will run to Father. And if Father is spacing out about whatever, and he's just kind of looking like she's just come off Mars and she's talking about religious vocation, she's going to read him as he doesn't see it in me. This is wrong. That's the way a woman does read that. And again, there's so much that goes into it, but I'm saying take them seriously. Take them very seriously. And yes, I know guys who have entered, a pre-seminary right out of high school, and I thought they were ready. And some that don't enter until they're majorly in the workforce. Some women have entered my community at 18 years old, some that are in the workforce. God's timing is specific for the individual. We don't set a rule and say, you're within this particular parameter. Now, at a certain age, a community like ours couldn't receive someone because she has to get a teaching degree and she really has to be pliable. And we women kind of tend to set our turf. Again, we're a little bit faster in some decisions. And so it wouldn't necessarily work. But it's very important that when the individual comes to these points, they are being heroic and they need to be appreciated for that. And whatever is the vocation, they need to really be supported. And if you disagree with it, take it to prayer. Maybe there's someone that they really do need to talk to or something. I have had women sit in front of me. It doesn't matter the age. I detect there's a real immaturity or there's they're not comfortable around men, so they're running to hide in a That's not a vocation. Neither one of those is going to get past this gatekeeper. I'm like, you know what? I might have to live with you someday. I like normal people. And they get it. They don't like it, but they get it. And then I will sometimes hear from mom, because of course this person is perfect. And then I'll get the daughter again and go, maybe you better explain the rest of the conversation. They do get it. Nobody has ever challenged them to grow up or to get real or to become normal or to all these many, many things that are essential. At the end of the day, if she is supposed to get married, she better be all these very same things. There was a young woman who made our vocational discernment retreats and then came on the pre-postulancy, meaning she had already gotten through to possibly entering that August 28th, which is when the group enters our community every year. And so at the pre-postulancy, which is the group that's supposed to be moving towards that unless something comes up, it's just not supposed to be for an individual, but the vast majority do. And so I gave this last talk on virtues necessary if you have a religious vocation, and we were taking notes and everything. She was kind of sitting in the back and just kind of looking at me, and I knew that she was thinking, I've discerned well, and it's going to be marriage. Anyway, so she really wasn't taking too many notes, but she just was staring. So when it was over, she comes up, and the others are kind of going out the room to whatever, and she says, could you just give me kind of a quickie on the virtues that would be necessary if I have a married vocation? And I looked at her and smiled and said, honey, I just did. Very same virtues, because they're virtues for authentic holiness. That particular young woman went back boyfriend who was a doctor at Mayo Clinic, and I liked the guy, but she decided she didn't. And she's one of our professed sisters now and another superior. It's like break through the walls and find why God created you. Your vocation is essential to your completion as a person, to the joy you are meant to experience, to the people out there along the line as you go towards heaven you're supposed to influence, and to heaven itself. You don't want to mess that up. Because deep inside there will always be that longing. I don't think I did the divine plan. And I will always know a certain loneliness. As Father mentioned yesterday, we all know loneliness, but loneliness calls us deeper to our spouse. And ultimately, to God Himself. And therefore, to where we find our graces and our fidelity to our particular vocation. I think I did pretty good. Thank you. All this time spent that I can do.
So we have time for some questions. The sisters set up, but there may be things that now they are doing right. So we're on either side. So let's make Sister burn her lunch.
Okay, come. Good. Come on. Y'all know people. This is where you have to step up to the plate. Okay.
As a grandparent, what do we say to our grandkids to get out of this technology service?
That is one of the hardest things. I think, number one, you really take into a lot of prayer. Whenever you can, you use your opportunity, certainly to say little bits and pieces, but they're going to be defensive. And the hard thing is going to be if the parents don't agree with the grandparents. And then maybe you get very creative and you start looking around for some opportunities for your grandson or daughter at that particular age to become a part of. The only way we're going to replace the addiction to I'm important because I'm getting Instagrams and emails and text messages and phone calls, and the only way we're going to really replace that is with human contact, person to person. When somebody else becomes my friend. Do you know they actually did this at this one university that I won't mention that just drove me so crazy I just wanted to scream right in the middle of the commons. I was so upset. Because nobody even said, hi sister, or you who, or she's alive, or anything, and I was, ugh. But that is the university that this particular group decided to do a study on. And the study was very simple. They got these individuals, and this is very high Ivy League, and they got them and they said, when are you happiest? The first answer for all of them was when I am succeeding, when are you second happiest? When I get these text messages, etc. So they had this group, and then they eventually asked the question, what does it mean to you when another human approaches you and you realize this person sees goodness in you just for who you are? And they were floored by that. I don't really get much of that. And they go, should that happen, it probably would set me on top of the world. They know it's the best. But they're not in a world sometimes that allows for that. So I think the substitute for these fake, I'm good, you're good, we're all good, balonies, I think the substitute for that is someone who really loves them, who is willing to spend time with them. It's always person to person. And ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, that's where Christ found them, the woman at the well. Suppose she had been looking at his, and he had been looking at him, and there had been no communication. It's always person to person. That's why God's image shines out from each of us. And we see it in another, and we're attracted to it. Because deepest down, God does reign inside each of us, if we allow Him to. And so a lot of young people fall into these traps because everybody else is doing it. And they will say the curse of this age is loneliness. And the only way out of it, I really think, is prayer and human relationships that are good and healthy and girls. So try to find those opportunities and encourage, could they be a part of this group? That's a good group, or this authentic. Thank you. Beautiful question. Oh. I can hear from both ears. Go for it. Okay.
My question would be, vocations to monasteries and such sometimes tend to ask for the college and such. If you got kids that are even thinking about it, that kind of puts them into that way to pursue that. And I'm just curious what your take on that is.
Yeah, good question. Again, I'm one who believes the timing is in God's realm, and for the individual, they know it better than I do. Now, you have to, for prudential reasons, as well as for canon law, the church's law, set a certain, like 18 is a good lower age, and then for prudential reasons, the individual community. But I do agree with you in that I can think of some who have entered our community, and I just have to say this is God's plan, because they said, I looked at another community, a good one, and I was interested in them, but I would have to get an entire college degree. Sister, I'm not sure I'm strong enough to hold on to this for 4 years in college. What do you say? And so we kind of talk about it. And some of our sisters are now, have been in that particular thing. But that particular community, prudentially, on their own turf, made those decisions. But I do think it's hard for girls to sometimes wait that long. Others, they just come across it maybe when they're seniors in college and it's in that neat little package and they graduate and it makes total sense. But a lot of times vocational discernment doesn't make sense. It makes faith. And so I would say for parents, really encourage them to read the lives of the saints, to deepen their prayer life in Eucharistic adoration, to go around and sometimes visit to the extent that they can, religious women, good priests, to stick in the whole thing. Because waiting isn't necessarily bad, but in our push-button society, it's much more difficult, even if it's a good reason. But you don't take yourself out of it, you stay in the ballpark. And if she, perhaps it's a she, wants to enter a community that says you must have a college degree, she has no choice. She's not telling them, you should take me now, I'm really good stuff. So she has the option to either get the degree and then try to enter, or perhaps to look at a community that does educate the sisters and doesn't require that degree. And that's I see that a lot. But stay in the whole realm. And again, Eucharistic adoration, there's so many opportunities they do have today. We can all talk about net and focus and these other, you could go on and on and on with the opportunities that they do have. But there is a timing for this. And so my community does not say that for that very reason. Because when a girl really makes that decision and she believes in it, and if the community also believes in her, short of it just being impossible for good reasons, which would not be God's will, and that she would do it, then we would accept her. Okay.
Sister, thank you for your insights on the millennials. Sometimes millennials is a negative connotation, but they are a generation of gifts, and I know your order has gifts and challenges, as everyone generation actually gifts and challenges too. Your order probably has the most millennials eventually. Can you talk about the gifts that they bring to our church, to religious life? Because they do bring, in my experience, a renewed enthusiasm, and they don't just buy into, well, the church says this, so I'm going to submit. They kind of challenge and they bring out the best in us at times. So I would love to hear that
thank you. We've gone from 4 to 136 right at the present moment. The average age is 31 years old, so again, they're all millennials. And it's very true. Sometimes I'll hear people complain about the millennials, and I'm like, I love them, bring them to me. Because what the deepest problem, I do believe, in the millennials is that they've not been challenged towards the hero, towards the fulfillment of the hero inside them. And they know that's there. And nobody will challenge. Just recently I got this email, and I was at a university, and one person, I know exactly who it is, and so I'm just kind of curious about this, said, "Sister challenged me too much." And so this priest who was there wrote back and said, "Maybe you need to decrease your challenge." So I wrote back and said, "If I decrease the challenge, we would not get anybody, and we wouldn't deserve anybody. So you do what you want to do, and I'm going to do what I believe in doing, because our community is growing very rapidly." And it's because if the religious vocation is there, and that's the hard part of determining, is it there, or is it just that the woman's heart is very open and she needs to go pray to find the guy that she's supposed to marry and pray to know him when she meets him? I go, pray for both of those. Pray for him to be virtuous, and pray to know him when you meet him. But if it is religious life, she will many times say, "Nobody ever saw that in me." I always kind of wondered. I always felt that I was a little bit different. When everybody else wanted to go window shop and try on clothes and everything else, it just didn't excite me to the degree it did my friends. We're talking different vocations, and they manifest in different ways. But again, the millennials will bring a sharp, piercing ability to see truth versus falsehood into a situation. They've been told the falsehood, and they're smart, and they're going, "I'm never going there again. This is a cop-out. This is the storyline." And they're very fast to see the differences. And they're very strong in knowing their own generation and going, "Look, I'm the same age you are. You can't fool me." And they're very good evangelizers, because they could be exactly where most of the people that they're meeting are. A lot of people that they're meeting are. And so I love the fact that, it's sometimes when we go through Lent and we offer up chocolate if we're a chocoholic, and then when Easter comes, it never tasted quite this good before. And I think that's the millennials. What they have not received, when they are given it, for the good, the true, the beautiful, they crave it and see it very distinctly in a new light. And they bring that to the world. A world sometimes that hasn't ever seen it, or a world that has seen it through somewhat jaded eyes. And they bring a freshness. They are like a tidal wave coming. And when they get on the right thing, they're powerful. I absolutely love them. Thank you for that question.
And Sister, we have one more question.
Okay, who's the lucky person? Oh, okay.
Myself, I experienced some of the struggles and gifts of my own friendships. And I'm just curious, just from my first struggles with commitment or with technology, I've seen it undermine really close friendships and relationships, and I've seen it in a struggle in my own relationship discernment. And especially when I'm encountering people who have no religious background. And so this is that is besides, I hearing fathers speak about strive for more, and this beautiful vision of what I want, and I see a disparity of the demographic. I guess, could you speak into how as a millennial, how do I get more millennials?
Come make our vocation discernment retreat. It forces the question, God, why did you make me? It's very hard to hear him out in our busyness, out in our culture, out in our society, that's never going to stop and say, did you pray today? Oh, yeah, right. You have to give God first dibs, and he will not disappoint. And He will answer, and you'll know it inside your heart. And then you'll say, this is what I was created for. This is what I want. Because once we have that figured out, whatever the vocation is, it sets us free. I like it no matter, when a young person figures out their vocation, it makes me so extremely happy because I'm like, they've been relieved from one of the worst things that life asks. That question, why did you make me? For a good person. And a person who doesn't have that asks it in a different way or medicates it, but always knows at the end of the day there's a deep, deep emptiness is getting deeper and deeper and I'm going nowhere. And it gets worse and worse and harder until we see some of the front lines of the newspaper. And I'm like, I get it. I know why he did that. He couldn't stand it anymore. There's reasons behind things. We are created with reason and free will. And we have to figure these things out, but you have to lay it on the line. Do with me according to your will. Mary at the Annunciation. And when you really do, and the first part of the retreat just opens you up to be able to do that. And it's all night silence and Eucharistic adoration. And in the morning is beginning to unpack it. And it's just 24 hours, and they work. Because what's hard to do back in your own home with your own, and your cell phone beside you, just in case somebody really needs you, because how could you not as a good person respond immediately? And you're supposed to be praying. It doesn't work. We can't. We've got too many societal things pulling against it. And we have to give God first dibs, and He will never disappoint when we do. Thank you, honey.
I believe Sister